We're going to be in Proverbs 10 and 11. I'm going to really skim Proverbs 11. I'm really just going to touch on highlights from Proverbs chapter 10 and focus in on just a couple verses in there. But what we're doing now is we come into the second section of our study of Proverbs. Proverbs 10 to 31 is very different from Proverbs 1 through 9. Proverbs 1 through 9 is a monologue. It is the opening poem. It is the teacher's instruction to his pupil, the father's instruction to his son to get wisdom to avoid folly. And Proverbs 10 now begins a series of individual proverbs. As I said last week, from Proverbs 10 to Proverbs 22, verse 15, is almost entirely two-line, so single verse proverbs. Proverbs 22, 16 to the end of the book are longer proverbs. Some are 4 lines, some are 6 lines. Proverbs 31 ends with a long poem about the virtuous woman. So there's still, it's not as concise as Proverbs 10 to 22, but it's still the same basic, generally speaking, the same basic proverbial pattern of that he's following. He's just a little bit longer. As we go through this, I'm not going to go chapter by chapter. There are somewhere in the range of 900 individual proverbs. And for me to go chapter by chapter and try to touch each proverb means we would be here for the next 40 years. And so we're going to avoid that. As profitable as that would be, we're going to avoid that. So most of what I'm going to do is going to be topical. However, there are a couple places in Proverbs where there are collections of proverbs related to a single subject. And so Proverbs 10 and 11 start off with a collection. Proverbs 16 is another collection. And so we're going to look at those two collections first before we move into more of the topical studies there. And what we're seeing in Proverbs 10 and 11, I will tell you the whole point right up front, is, as the title says, wisdom is moral. So as we've been, Proverbs 1 through 9, we've been crying out to get wisdom. What Proverbs then lays out in chapters 10 and 11 is that wisdom is righteous. So there is a direct relationship between wisdom and righteousness, folly and wickedness. So we see this. Proverbs 23, verse 24. I don't think I told you to turn there. But go there in your Bibles and look. Proverbs 23, verse 24. And just to give you a fair warning, I am going to be asking what kind of parallelism this is. So from here on out, there's going to be a pop quiz every week as we talk about what kind of parallelism. So that's the first section that we went through. So I am going to be asking about that as we go along, starting with this verse. So let me read chapter 23, verse 24. It says, "The father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and he who begets a wise child will delight in him." So we had several different kinds of parallelism. We had the repeating parallelism, which said the same thing twice. We had the contrasting parallelism, which said not quite the opposite, but the other side of the coin, kind of the negative statement of it. You have the building parallelism, where you added information in the second line. Developing parallelism is where you add in the second line. Then you have illustrating. Thank you. That sounds right. So you have the illustrating one where you use a figure of speech. Then you have the building one, the climactic, where each line builds on the earlier lines. Then you have the mirroring ones, where the pivoting ones. You have the pivoting ones where the middle line applies to the first and third line. And then you have the mirroring one, where the second part repeats the first in reverse order. And then you have cause and effect, which is just that. It states the effect of the behavior there. So let me rattle through those again and see if I can get them right. You have the repeating, contrasting, developing, illustrating, building, mirroring, pivoting, mirroring, and cause and effect. So of those, what is verse 24? It is the repeating. And the way you know that is you're looking at the subject and verbs and all of that. And so you have the Father, and then the second line you have He. It's the same person. Then you have the Father of the righteous. So we have not just an individual, but you also have a relationship there. There's a relationship, so He has fathered, if you will, this righteous one. What is He going to do? What is His Father going to do? He's going to rejoice. And then the second line, the He who begets will do what? Will delight. So you see, these are just synonyms for one another. So the Father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and because these are a repeating parallel, then he who begets a wise child will delight in him. So I say all of that to say you have then righteous and wise are used as synonyms. In this verse, the righteous is the wise. The wise is the righteous. Does that make sense? So what I say, all of that's just one place where we see this equating of wisdom with righteousness. So go back to chapter 10 and verse 23. Proverbs 10 verse 23 says, "To do evil is like sport to a fool, but a man of understanding has wisdom." What kind of parallelism is that? Yeah, that's the contrasting. And remember, if you see the word "but" in the proverb, it is almost always going to be that contrasting parallelism. So, to do evil is like sport to a fool. What is, in that case, that use, what does sport mean? Yeah, pleasure. It's a fun game that he wants to do. It's something he enjoys doing. So the fool delights in doing evil. He loves evil. It is a game to him to do evil. And so we see in this verse, again, the contrasting comparison. The wise are righteous. The fool does evil. And Proverbs 10 and 11 are going to bear that out. So, and you're going to see it throughout this collection of Proverbs. So if you don't, I don't think this is in your notes, but let me give you some synonyms for righteous in Proverbs. And I'll go slow because you can write these down because they will change the way you read the Proverbs. So synonyms for righteous: wise. I've already touched on that one. Diligent. Loving. One who keeps instruction. So the righteous is one who keeps instruction. The righteous is blessed. The righteous has understanding. The righteous fears God. He fears God. The righteous is upright. He is just. The righteous is humble and gracious. The righteous is merciful, and he is blameless. And last one, generous. So to switch the terms around, it means I can say the wise are diligent, loving, keep instruction, are blessed, have understanding, fear God, are upright, just, humble, gracious, merciful, blameless, and generous. So if you have that list and you're reading through the Proverbs and you note these various words, even though it may not say directly wise or righteous man, you are reading about the wise and righteous man. And what Proverbs 10 and 11 begin to do is to show the value of righteousness over wickedness. So I'm going to put them up on the screen here, and then I'm going to move over there, and we're going to work with this a little bit. So we have a chiastic antithetical parallelism. So, right? Everybody got that? So you have a combination of the contrasting parallels and then the mirroring parallels. So you have contrast in verse 2, treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivers from death. Now you have the repetition of the ideas in reverse order. The Lord will not allow the righteous to famish, but he cast away the desire of the wicked. Now let's walk through that relatively quickly here and see what we see. We have, looking at these two words, don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about grammar at all, but looking at these two lines, what words there do you see that are opposite to one another?
Wickedness and righteousness.
Okay, so you have wickedness and you have righteousness. Then you have two ideas that are opposite. So there's not words that are direct opposite, but ideas that are direct opposite. So what do treasures of wickedness do?
Nothing.
They're of no value. Is it valuable to be delivered from death? Is there some good and gain in that? Yeah. So you have these ideas of that which is of no value, which does really nothing, and that which we would all recognize as incredibly valuable does something. And the word Carolyn pointed out there, identified for us, treasures. It doesn't have any corresponding word in the second line. So it sets up another contrast. So if I say treasures of wickedness, what kind of images come into your mind? If I have a treasure, what do I have? I have something of value. And what else do we usually think of when we think of treasures?
Money.
Okay, money. Something that's, stuff. Something that's been collected and piled up. So if I have a diamond, you might not say I have a treasure. If I have a chest of diamonds, you would certainly say I have a treasure. And so that's really the idea, a treasury full of the merchandise of wickedness. So you have a bank vault full of these treasures acquired from wickedness. How much profit is in them?
Nothing.
None. But if I have righteousness by itself, there's no treasury here in the verse. The righteousness by itself is of incredible profit. And then we have, again, a contrasting parallel. And so this line and this line, there's two words that are synonyms. There's a noun and its pronoun. If that helps you at all.
Lord.
Okay, so you have Lord and He, and then you have actions that God does. Okay, cast. Okay, and I'm going to take the whole phrase there because the negative's important. They have will not allow, and then you have two contrasting words. You have the righteous and the wicked. And then you have, so that leaves us really two ideas. What's the last word there? Famish. Jim, what is that talking about? Yeah, it's certainly not allow the righteous soul to hunger, to do without. What about that idea? How does that relate to this? Okay, well, let me bring in more of it to help us with that. How does a castaway desire related to famishing? Because we have God here is not allowing the righteous to go hungry, but instead the wicked, the things they want, he's going to cast it away. He's going to get rid of it completely. So this right here is really setting the tenor for all the rest of the Proverbs. You're starting this new section. You've finished the monologue. You come now to these two verses. And it's telling us this is how you evaluate life. This is how you evaluate the rest of Proverbs. This is what wisdom looks like. So that the wisdom recognizes, the wise one recognizes wickedness is of no value. So we're back to your notes. Excuse me, we're back to your notes if you missed that. So the wickedness is valueless. It profits nothing. They bring no benefit. So you have hoards amassed by the wicked. It's of no value. There's no benefit, no lasting benefit to it. God is the active agent in thwarting the desires of the wicked. And this tells us something about all that we're talking about with Proverbs. We read the Proverbs and we have cause and effect. We have practical observations about life. We have a host of descriptions about what the wise life looks like and what the foolish life looks like. And there's consequences to all of them. There's bad consequences to folly. And it is God who is the one who brings those consequences. So, if you will, we can say this is a law of nature in that God has ordered the universe in such a way that sin is destructive. And this is also the active working of God in bringing the consequences of sin upon the person, so that there's ultimately no value and no benefit to wickedness. Now, we do have to remind ourselves as we're thinking about this, is treasure, a chest full of diamonds, is that of value in this world? No. Yes, it is. Yes. I could sell it for a lot of money if I wanted to. But yes, and that's exactly the point. There is great value of some of these things in this world, but it's of no real value. It's of no lasting value, and it doesn't bring any benefit. In fact, it rots the soul. It is corrupting and destroying. Even though there may be a huge hoard of wealth, what you get out of it is not worth it. On the other hand, you have righteousness. And what we find here is that righteousness preserves life. It rescues from death. And it is preserved by God. So that God is the active agent in protecting the righteous. Proverbs has a view of God in which He is sovereignly in control of all things, and in which He is actively involved in men and women's lives. He is not just a sovereign God seated way up there. He is a sovereign God actively working here. And this is a theme that is repeated over and over again in Proverbs 10 through 11. And what I want to do very, very briefly, because Jim really didn't think I could get through all 2 chapters. So No, actually, I think he's right. I'm not going to. But what I want to do very briefly is walk through some of the ways in which we see righteousness preserving life and wickedness destroying it. So we have righteousness simply as the best security. This is from Derek Kidner. It's an excellent little book on Proverbs. But he says in Proverbs, sin seen as folly sets up strains in the structure of life which can only end in breakdowns. What does that mean? It means we were created to live a certain way. And when we live contrary to that way, it creates problems in our life. If you have a vehicle that is created to do a certain thing, but if you try to go outside of that and you do something else with it, so you take Carolyn's little Honda and decide to go cruising the Thompson Plains through the mud holes and over the rocks and all of that stuff. And if you do that, you might be able to do it once or twice on a really nice day and go really slow. But if you do that on a regular basis, what's going to happen to her little car? Yeah, you're going to set up strains which will end in breakdowns. It's not designed to work that way. And that's what he's saying. And that's the reality of creation that Proverbs is revealing to us. Derek Kidner also says, however much rope God gives us, he always remains in control. Does it seem at times as if God lets the wicked run amok? Yes. Absolutely. But he remains in control. He still brings about consequences. He also says, whatever their worldly state, the righteous are the truly rich. And then in the world to come, justice will be complete. So what we have in the next several verses in Proverbs chapter 10 is first the blessing of righteousness, the curse of wickedness. We've seen that here a little bit already. We also see the reward of righteousness and the punishment of wickedness. So, and you look at verse 22, it says, the blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. So what is the reward of righteousness? Sorrow-free wealth. What we have here, if you keep reading, I'm not going to go through all of this, but you look at just verse 24, the fear of the wicked will come upon him. The righteous have wealth with no sorrow. Wickedness have fear, and fear that finds them. We also have the security of righteousness and the futility of wickedness. Again, just one verse here, verse 27. The fear of the Lord prolongs days, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. Now we go to Old Covenant, the Old Testament, and recognizing the Mosaic covenant here, there is a promise of length of days in the land. And so there's a sense in which I would say this proverb is more of a promise than it would be for us today. But at the same time, as a general principle, we also recognize that wickedness does shorten life. You take the extremes of wickedness, it absolutely cuts off the years of life. So you take alcohol consumption. I just heard something here recently. I think Ruth told me, but I just heard something recently that now the doctors are saying, it used to be they said a glass of wine at night was good for you. Now they're saying, yeah, a glass of wine at night may help your heart, but it's killing your liver. And so there's, even in that, I'm not even talking about drunkenness at that point. We know the drunkard is destroying his body. And we could go, I won't multiply examples because we can readily think of them. The years of the wicked is, generally speaking, shorter than the righteous who live godly lives. Again, there's a lot of exceptions. That's why this is a principle, not an absolute promise. We also have the worth of righteousness and the shame of wickedness. Proverbs 10 and verse 6, it says, blessings are on the head of the righteous, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked. And verse 11 says something very similar. The mouth of the righteous is a well of life, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked. Verse 20, the tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. Okay, so we have the righteous and the wicked. We have value at the end of the sentence there. What's the value at the end of the first line? Choice silver. So would we say that's valuable or invaluable or not valuable? Yeah, it is very valuable. What's the value at the end of the second line? Little. Yeah, worth little. So we have an absolute opposites here. Valuable, not valuable, righteous, and wicked. What are the organs in this verse? Tongue and heart. Tongue and heart. Is there any relationship between these two things? Absolutely. I'm glad everybody's been paying attention Sunday morning. As I just said recently here, the heart controls the tongue. Fascinating thing, though, is which of these two is most valuable? The heart. So we have a contrast between the external organ and the immaterial. This is not talking about the physical heart. It's talking about the soul of the spirit that drives it. And he says the tongue, which is driven by the heart, is incredibly valuable. But the heart, the root of the wicked, is of no value. It's an astonishing contrast, and it's repeated over and over and over again in Proverbs. You're going to see this. If you're looking for it, you're going to see this show up time and time again, that the contrast between the heart and the tongue of the righteous and the wicked, and their value. You have now assurances in Proverbs 11. You have the righteous, verses 3 through 8, know true security. They have and enjoy true security. The righteous are good for society. Does society believe that? Does our society right now believe that? No, not at all. We saw that with the response to the murder of Charlie Kirk. There were those in our society who thought it was a great thing that a man arguing for biblical morality was killed. They think he was evil. They think that Christians are ills in society. Some of the philosophers of this world, you go back to Nietzsche, and he was sure that the problem with the world was Christianity. You get rid of it, and everything would be better. Who said that? And so you have the world, the unsaved world, the wicked world, doesn't see the righteous as good for society. But Scriptures plainly declares the righteous are good for society. There's one example I'll give you from the book of Genesis. Sodom and Gomorrah. Would righteous people in that city, would a few more righteous people in that city have been good for it? Yeah. Yeah. We have a third, the righteous flourish. There truly is flourishing in righteousness. Again, some of this may be a relative physical flourishing. You do better as a righteous one than you would as a wicked one. But certainly the abundance of the heart, the blessings of God, those immaterial things, that they really are human flourishing. I don't know if that's a phrase that y'all hear much, but it's one that I hear a lot talking about Scriptures and the message of Scriptures, and that relate what Scriptures teaches to human flourishing. And what causes us to truly flourish, to prosper, to live abundantly full lives is righteousness. Proverbs 10 tells us a lot about the speech of the righteous because this direct connection between the heart and the tongue. It tells us those who are truly righteous are going to be evident by the way they speak. Those who are wicked will be evident by the way they speak. And so Proverbs 10 verse 11, the tongue of the righteous is a well of life. Israel is an arid climate, and they have a long dry season. So what do you think might be very important in that culture? Water. It literally is life-sustaining. It's necessary. You have a well full of water. It is a well of life. I think that's part of the imagery, the picture going on here. The speech of the righteous is like this well sunk in the middle of a desert where any who need it can come and have life. The speech of the righteous, they cover sin. The hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin. I can't get into the ins and outs of this, but I will say this does not mean the righteous hide sin which should be exposed. Rather, we put it in the verse, hatred stirs up strife. This is a contrasting proverb. And so the contrast to stirring up strife is covering sin. So love is the one who does not seek to stir up trouble. The righteous is one who loves to cover the sin, to not gossip, to not incite conflict when something should be kept secret. You go to Matthew chapter 18, the instructions to believers when they have been sinned against is to go to your brother privately. Go, and between you and him alone, seek reconciliation. That's covering sin. That's absolutely a right application of this verse, is I'm not going to everybody else before going to the one who sinned against me. I'm going to the one who sinned against me so that it can be made right. And when it has been made right, the matter's done. There's nothing else that needs to be said or done about it. It's only when it cannot be made right, when the one who sinned refuses to repent, that others are brought into this. Love covers sin, and that it seeks to limit its exposure to as small an area as possible. This is wise. The speech of the righteous, verse 13, is simply wise. Wisdom is found on the lips of him who has understanding. Again, reminding you of some of the definitions of wisdom, it is skill in living. It is the ability to navigate well the hazards of life. So the speech of the righteous is skillful. It is that which does give good direction in life, to self and to others. It is restrained. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. I think this really should be a verse on every one of our tongues. In the multitude of the word, there wanteth not sin. There's no lack of sin. The more we speak, the more we sin. And so the speech of the righteous, it doesn't refuse to speak. That's not the answer. Rather, there is wisdom in the speaking. So go back to the first principle here. There's a well of life. If the righteous do not speak, there's no life-giving words. But the righteous restrains his speech so that he speaks what should be spoken, when it should be spoken. And that's where the wisdom comes in discerning and knowing how all of these things should be. We have as well, the speech of the righteous is valuable, if you will, because of its rarity. It's valuable. It's not just all over the place. The fool just vomits out. He's described like a pipe with no valve on it, and just sewage rushing through it. It's not worth anything. It's dangerous and destructive. The righteous has a tight control on what comes out of his mouth. He seeks to bring out, because his heart is righteous, he seeks to bring out words that are righteous. So what comes out of his mouth is this spring of life-giving words. And so because of its work, because of its rarity, it is incredibly valuable. It is gracious. It's the acceptable here. Verse 32, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable. This is gracious words in the sense of speaking good, kind words to others, speaking rightly. But the acceptable here is not so much what is acceptable to men. It's not what is acceptable to men. It's speaking words that are acceptable to God. So to bring in the New Testament again, Ephesians 4, verse 15, is speaking the truth in love. Words that are acceptable to God are truthful words, compassionately spoken. We have the satisfaction of the righteous. Righteousness is immensely satisfying. In the sense, not of a smug self-satisfaction, but in the sense of bringing delight and contentment. There's a granted desires. So that the desires, what he simply says, verse 24, the fear of the desire of the righteous will be granted. There's security. A whirlwind comes by, the wicked is blown away. The righteous have a sure foundation. It sounds a whole lot like Matthew chapter 7. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The foolish man on the sand when the storm arose and beat on it with a violent flood. The wise man's house stood. The foolish man's house was washed away. That's the kind of security of righteousness. There's a promise of long life. We've already touched on this briefly, so I won't say any more on it, but just there's long life. There's a glad hope. So it says the hope of the righteous will be gladness. There's a hope received. It's part of where that gladness comes from, but it's a good, gladdening hope. It's not a hope which embitters. It's not a hope which destroys. It's not a hope which corrupts. It's a hope which is good for the person, so that when they receive that hope, they are delighted by it. Wickedness simply is opposed to what is pleasant. Chapter 11 tells us some of the habits of the righteous, and I'm going to just give you the blanks. I apologize, but just give you the blanks here. The righteous man is honest in business. He's not a cheat. He's honest. He's humble. Not arrogant. Humble. He's upright. He walks straight according to the rule that God has set. He is blameless. Because he lives in this way, because he directs his way rightly, there's no valid accusation that can be laid against him. He is respectful of others. The righteous treats others with respect. He refuses to gossip. He is gracious. Verse 16, he is gracious. He is merciful. There's a compassion, a pity, a patience present. He's gracious, merciful, generous. He's not stingy. Does not withhold good to those whom it is due. He's generous. He trusts God. In summary, the fruit of righteousness is life fulfilling. There truly is a full life in walking with God. The fruit of wickedness is life destroying. It's just, and I know our culture doesn't believe this, but this is the reality. The fruit of wickedness is destruction. To the individual, we're watching its destruction in societies. It is life destroying. Verse 31 verse 31 of Proverbs chapter 11. If the righteousness will be recompensed on the earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner? Life's choices will be repaid. Going all the way back to verses 2 and 3 of chapter 10, who does the repaying? God does. He hasn't lost sight of that. It's not forgotten by now. That is core, foundational to all the rest of what's going on in these two chapters and the rest of the book. And so that we come to the end of chapter 11, it says that the ungodly and the sinner will be repaid. The righteous will be repaid. We know God does it. Therefore, what you speak reveals who you are. This is one of the devastating truths of Proverbs. When we think about what we speak when we're angry, when we're afraid, it reveals the heart. Remember, these two are connected. There's a direct pipeline between heart and tongue. So that what you speak reveals what's going on in the heart. So the solution to bad words is righteousness. To say it another way, to change your words, your heart must be changed. There absolutely is value in the self-control, the discipline of, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm not going to say certain words. I'm not going to engage in certain speech habits. There is value in that. Part of the way that we train our hearts is by what we do. But ultimately, the way that our words are transformed is for the heart to be changed into greater righteousness, our hearts to be brought into greater conformity to the image of Christ. So if you or somebody you know is struggling with evil speaking, ultimately, you must get to their heart for them to speak rightly. Therefore, wicked speech results in harm in this life and judgment in the one to come. I'll remind you of Jesus' words, I believe it's Matthew chapter 12, that we will give account of every idle word that we speak. Even as believers, we're accountable for our words. We're not condemned for our words, because there's therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, but we are accountable for them. Righteous speech is profitable in this life and in the life to come. So if you want to have that profitable speech, be righteous. That's the solution. Not speak righteous. It's not where you start. You start by being righteous. And out of that righteous heart will come righteous words.